Welcome to the Invest for More Real Estate Podcast. My name is Mark Ferguson, and I am your host. I'm a house flipper. I flip 10 to 15 houses a year. I own 13 rental properties with a goal to buy 100 by 2023. I'm also a real estate agent. I've been licensed since '01. I run a team of 9. We sell close to 200 houses a year. So on this show, we like to interview house flippers, landlords, and the best real estate agents in the business. So stay tuned for some great shows. If you want more information on my rentals, on the numbers, how I buy properties, check out investformore.com. Hi, everyone. It's Mark Ferguson with Invest for More. I'd like to welcome you to another podcast on real estate investing, being a real estate agent, and just success in general. Previously, a lot of our shows have been about wholesalers, real estate agents, fix and flippers. Today, I've got an awesome guest who has been in the real estate industry and made a ton of money in it, but that's not his focus now. We're going to talk a little bit about real estate. We're also going to talk a lot about success, mindset, an incredible story in how he's built fantastic business, in fact, multiple businesses. So I'd like to welcome Pejman Ghadimi. Thanks for being on the show. How are you doing?
Good, buddy. Thanks for having me on your show. It's good to talk again.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I actually did a show for PJ a few months ago on his site, secretentourage.com, which we'll talk about here later on, but a great site. PJ, first off, you came to the U.S. when you were 12, right? Do you want to talk a little bit about how that experience was and how that kind of shaped your entrepreneurial aspect?
Absolutely. I think I was roughly, I was like 12 going on 13, but I was born in Iran during the revolution. And then me and my mom were forced to flee the country because we worked directly for the Shah, which at the time was the king. And so we were forced to kind of get out of the country, and we tried to come to the United States and we couldn't. So we ended up going to France, where my mom started a business similar to Kinko's today, like the FedEx Kinko's copy. And she did that for a little bit over 10 years, did really well for herself, kind of built that starting from zero. I watched that whole thing take place. And then long story short, we get one shot at coming in the United States, and we have to leave overnight, literally, like not a joke. So like we have to wake up the next day and we have to go, like almost like someone would be like, there's a boat leaving, you know,
Wow.
But it wasn't a boat. It was like legal, but it was like, you have to get out of here like today. And that's the only way you're going to go. So after trying for 10 years, she finally gets a visa and we're like, get off. So, and we completely leave everything behind. She leaves her business behind, all their money behind, our apartment at the time, you know, all our furniture. So we start again in the US with zero once more, you know, so second strike. And now we're like back to zero with like barely 20 grand of what she had that she could get together, you know, before we left. That wasn't going to be suspicious. And we're now in the country and we have no way to be here legally in terms of like, no green card, you know, like nothing that allows us to work or anything, but we're here and that's what she wanted. So, you know, we end up here and long story short, I end up with my uncle who is already in the United States, is semi-established, you know, doing well for himself and kind of helps her out a little bit and gives us kind of a home, you know, like basically a car to get around, and through his connections gets us a social, but not necessarily a social you can use for anything, just one of those like pieces of paper that's a social on it and it blindly says on it, you know, you cannot work with this, you're not authorized to work. And so, you know, that kind of like set the precedence for what was going to happen the next 10 years. It was like, we're in this brand new country again, and I don't speak, you know, really good English. I don't really know anything, and I'm going to go back to a different school again. And once again, by the time I turn 14 in 2 years, I probably won't be able to do anything because I still won't be legal here. So that's kind of how we ended up in the United States. And then from there, it was quite a very interesting journey going forward.
That's quite a story. Yeah, for people who think they had it rough having to go to public schools in the States or
I'm only telling you like 10% of it too. I mean, like it was really bad. It wasn't one of those like, you know, very straightforward kind of model. I mean, I'll give you some context when you said for people who complain, right? people who are in the United States really don't understand how lucky they are right from the start. We were in France, and my mom literally wanted to come to the United States like every day. Like she would do whatever it took because she knew it was a better place for me to grow as an individual and have a better future rather than in Europe. So wanting to come here and wanting to be with her only brother that she really could be with, that was kind of like her own child. Like she would go to the embassy literally every 6 months, like on the dot. And we didn't have a car, right? Like when we were in France, we were like walking in the subway and everything. I mean, you have to think like winter, 1 hour walk, 1 hour on the subway, 1 hour walk again, only go to an embassy to be literally like beaten out of it or thrown out of it like you're a piece of garbage every single 6 months on the dot for 10 years with a child, you know, like on top of that, like, and barely being able to like afford to live to begin with. And, you know, like, so just go right there and get thrown out. And then one day they're like, hey, you can go. And then despite everything you've built, despite all the struggles, you're like, you know what, I'm going to leave everything behind and I'm going to completely take a chance and go. I think people really take it for granted when they're here and they don't realize like what people are willing to do to be here and the opportunities that exist in this country.
Right. No, it's true. When I read books, when I see stories about some of the ultra successful people, it seems like many of them have that same kind of background where they had absolutely nothing, or they went through just horrible stories. And for whatever reason, that kind of puts a desire or something in you. You want to make it at all costs after being through that. And you have nothing to lose, really, right? I mean,
think about it this way. I think I like to position it more in the sense that when your ass is against the wall, you typically find a way. I think like when you're at the gym and you're benching, you know, you can bench, let's say you have a max and your friends are there and you're like, oh, I'm max like 200 pounds, whatever it is. But if you're hanging off a cliff and your life is in danger, suddenly you're benching like 3 times that amount for that one time, right? So it's like that need for survival kicks in. And it's such a powerful thing, especially when at first it's kind of something that happens. You're about to get hit, so you move faster. You're about to fall off a cliff, you bench more. But over time, if you can train yourself to really make yourself feel like you're there and work every day as if it's kind of like the no choice mentality, you know, and you have to make it, then you make a lot more progress than the one person that's sitting there and that's like, oh yeah, I have time. You know, I have 10 years to make this happen. I'm just going to take every day and slowly move forward and do this 3 tasks today on a calendar. You know, like that shit doesn't work. Forgive me, but it doesn't work like in business, you know, like there's no such thing as work-life balance. It's bullshit. Like everything people tell you, they're like, oh yeah, you need to spend 3 hours a day with your family. You wake up at 6 a.m., you know, hit the gym by 7. All of that stuff is bullshit. There's only one thing. There's life, and life, that's it. And if life encompasses work, family, and everything else, then it's a mixture of the two. But there's no such thing as work-life balance. Everything always intermingles, and you have to find a way to really function within the chaos. But that's really what entrepreneurship is about anyways. So.
I know your answer to this, but I'm sure you have some strong opinions on the idea of working 40 years in a corporate job just so you can retire for 10 years at the end of your life and hope you have enough money left over. I mean, that's a great strategy.
It's not bad. I actually have a huge history in corporate America. I was a banker really young. I was a bank manager when I was 18 years old. By 25, I was pretty much on top of the food chain of a retail bank. You know, almost every single bank the company actually had, and I was like almost 300. I had created new concepts for a bank that are still to this day extremely profitable for the new bank that's acquired my old bank. So, you know, I went into corporate America with a very naive mind, you know, with a very open mind to the idea that great people are going to help me do great things and what an opportunity, you know, and you can up your salary every year. And I really got it. Like I did really well. You know, I got promoted, I think it was like 7 times in 3 years, you know, and to positions that were almost like 200% salary increases, you know. I still, to this day, I have a letter from my one salary increase that was like from the CEO of the company. I was like, we bumped your salary up 170%. And, you know, like people receive letters that are like 2% increases, you know, per year, and they're excited. And I'm like, I just hanged on to that because I was like, I don't think anyone will ever see that in their life. You know, like 170% increase for being at your job and doing a good job. But like these were the days back when banks weren't as regulated, things were different. And obviously you talk about real estate a lot. So it was a time where even real estate wasn't regulated as much as it is today, and the practices and things weren't in place. But during my corporate America time, I really did well, and I really loved my job. I loved the leadership aspect. I loved the training aspect. I loved what I was doing very, very much so. But I think very important to note that I still was an entrepreneur on the side. I still had a side business during that time. And I still believed in one thing, that we have to align our goals to what we do. And what I mean by that is, if you want to work in corporate America, there's nothing wrong with that. Some people just like structure, they like working for others, et cetera. And they don't mind working 40 years. They might even do very well in a corporate position, right? We're not talking about like entry level 30K a year. They might do well, they might make 150K, 200K, whatever it is. But really, the part that's confusing for people is that they go in jobs, so they'll go work as like retail manager at the mall, and they'll be like, oh my God, in 5 years, I want a Lamborghini or I want a Ferrari. And it's like, okay, well, that's great. So what are you going to do for that? And they're like, well, I'm going to work here. Well, that doesn't make any sense, right? Like that's just the confusing part. It's like when you have these great aspirations, these goals, and you're doing absolutely nothing other than just going day by day and doing the ordinary, hoping that something extraordinary happens. I think that the ordinary is following the path society has created. Like go to school, go to work, retire, like you said, 40 years later with a 10-year pension left, and hopefully you'll die within that time, right? Like that's really what society creates.
Yeah.
But I think there's nothing wrong with that. People go to school and they're like, I've invested 100 grand in school and I'm making 40K a year. That's normal. I guess the problem is the expectation you have from the system. So the problem is not the system, but it's your expectation is that the system will make you successful. And in reality, no one but yourself can make you successful. And what ends up happening is the system is a business, right? It's a working machine, and it requires moving people, which are us, to fall into it and actually function within it. But so the way it positions itself as a system is, hey, if you follow the steps, you'll make it. It'll take you 40 years, but you'll make it. Mm-hmm. But their definition of you've made it, or you're going to make it is very different than a person's desire to make it or what they really see for themselves, right? And because the two are not aligned and people have no self-awareness that like, oh, well, that's what they're talking about. I'm talking about a Lamborghini. They're talking about a pension at 60, And I think because people misalign themselves, they believe that the system is there to make them rich when the system is there to teach them to survive. Like a system makes you a lawyer or a doctor, not like a wealthy billion-dollar doctor. It makes you a doctor that can operate within a hospital system. Now you have to go out there and learn how to be an entrepreneur as a doctor and open 10 offices, create tools, push yourself further and acquire that whole lifestyle that you believe the doctor should have after spending 12 years going through an educational route that cost them $1 million in back-end loans, right? So I think people misunderstand. They're like, the minute I come out of the system, I'm going to be successful. No, the minute you come out of any system, doesn't matter what it is. You have the basic knowledge to get started. And getting started means you have the basic knowledge of putting your ass in front of a computer or at work and saying, you know what, now I have the basic needs to survive. And I understand what to do to make basically what I need to eat and to lodge myself. Now, all that Lamborghini shit is like out the door. It's got to be something that comes later because you understand how to actually work the system and grow it and get further than just the survival aspect.
I take notes and I've read a lot of information on your history and I have where I want to take the show. But I mean, you say some really interesting things that just makes me think of, 5 years ago, I was a real estate agent, worked with my dad doing some flips and I was doing well, but I never thought I could own a Lamborghini. The thought
that if I was going to spend 40 hours at work at any given point for any reason for a week, then I was going to make the 40.
Like, oh man, that's not for me. That's for somebody else. And then I started just changing my mindset and thinking, I'm not going to let society tell me what I want. I'm not going to let them dictate whether I should have a nice car. Frugal is in right now like crazy. I mean, you read Mr. Money Mustache and some other blogs, and they're talking about, not spending money on toothpaste because it's too expensive. It's crazy. But, I changed my mindset from I'm not going to decide I want a Toyota Corolla I really want this. It's something I want. And I think not only do people misalign themselves as far as I'm going to work as a bank teller making 20 grand a year and drive a Lamborghini, but they let society tell them you don't need to want a Lamborghini. That's not a goal you should have. That's a bad goal to have. And I think people should realize, make goals that things you really want. Don't let society tell you what you want.
Well, I think, the first thing is there's a huge misconception of goals too, like you said, and we can talk about that a little further. But you brought up something really interesting. They're like, oh, they're a bank teller. And, when you're in corporate America, people believe, and this is the really funny part, people believe that corporate America promotes people and your boss promotes you. That's completely a lie. First off, no one ever promotes you by yourself at work. You promote yourself based on your actions, based on your what you're able to bring forward to the company. And you create the opportunity of a promotion for yourself. There was never a single promotion at work where someone was like, oh, hey, there is kind of like maybe going to be an opening. You should apply for it. You know, for me, it was always like, I was ready knowing that that opening was going to come due at some point, somewhere. And I was already prepared to say, hey, I'm already built to go straight into that. So you don't even need to open that promotion for another like 12 people to apply to it, because I'm the perfect candidate for it. Now, nobody made me the perfect candidate. I worked myself up to that in addition to my day-to-day interactions or things I had to do at my job to prepare to put myself to the next level. So by the time that promotion came, I was already operating at a district manager level when I was a bank manager, and then as an executive when I was a district manager. You know, like I was already in like way ahead of my time. And that came from this drive that I understood that if I was going to spend 40 hours at work at any given point for any reason for a week, then I was going to make the 40 hours count. So most people are like, well, there isn't enough time. You know, like you don't realize how stressful my job is. Do you realize that most people spend 30% of their time working in their jobs at work and 70% either ear fucking themselves or actually just looking at the clock or looking at their computer, the internet, or being highly confused? Now, what if you took that same 70% of time and only made yourself work 70% more of the same time you're there? So in other words, you were 100% operational during the time you're already paid to be operational by someone else, right? How much more could you accomplish? Probably 4 times what you're accomplishing at work today. And it wouldn't require you to work or sit at your desk 1 hour in addition to what you're currently doing, you know, on top of anything. So it wouldn't take time away from your kids. It wouldn't do anything else. But it's because we so have this thing in our head that like, if you don't build your dreams, you're building someone else's dreams and all that crap, right? Because we're fed this by society. Even on the entrepreneurial side, that's the problem too, right? Because people are told that. So they're like, I don't want to build someone else's dreams. You know, like, why would I want to do that? So let me not do shit. Let me just sit here behind a desk and I'll just collect the paycheck. Then I'm getting my dream. No, you're doing the complete opposite. Like, how many times do you hear people, I'm sure you hear this a lot in investment, you know, like places, people are like, I want to be a millionaire. I want to be a billionaire. I want a Lamborghini, right? But how many times do you hear them say, I want to become the best realtor in my county? How many times do you hear them say, I want to be the top of the line chef that's in Chicago, or I want to be the most powerful nutrition business, you know, across the United States? No, because people dream. Those are dreams. I want to be a millionaire. I want to have a Lamborghini. It's all bullshit. If you become great at anything you do, doesn't matter what it is, that you're a realtor, an investor, a day trader, whatever it is. If you're great at it, that will automatically make you a millionaire, right? But the reason we don't focus on that is because that requires a shitload of work. It's like to be the best day trader, well, there's already 5,000 of them out there, right? So like for you to go out there and be like, I'm going to be the best day trader, it's going to take a lot of work day in and day out for like 6-7 years. But that's the only way you're going to make it anyways. So the goal is, why not do that now, even though you know that work's going to be there and you're going to go through hell for like 6 years? Because at some point, you're going to realize you're going to have to go through that hell. Like everyone has to give in their dues. You know, like in our dues are like 10 years of hell. If you're an entrepreneur, a day trader, you want to be successful, it's 10 years of commitment above and beyond anything else. And if you can't give the 10 years, then don't start at all. Like, why waste it? Go work for someone else, do the best you can, keep moving up the ladder, earn a nice 6-figure salary, go home, balance with your, you know, that whole work-life balance bullshit. Like go to your family, be happy, go to your soccer games, come home, but then don't look at the other guy with the Lamborghini and wonder like, man, like I want that car, you know, like I really wish I had that guy's car. It's awesome. No, because that guy, I'm not saying people are not born into wealth either, or don't get lucky in that aspect, but that guy, even that luck that other people have, which are, you know, from obviously their father's work, etc. At some point, someone suffered a 10-year due. So at some point, someone put in that work, you know, regardless that it's passed on or not. But that guy you see that's really who you wish you were, is the only difference between that guy and you is that he actually did it when you thought about it. And I don't even mean your idea. He put in the work when you were wondering like, I should go home, or what should I have for lunch? That was the difference. He didn't give a shit for 10 years and you cared about all these other things that are pointless and meaningless. So I think that's the biggest thing, is people need to align their expectations to the work they're willing to put in. And then from that aspect, they can really move their life forward much faster.
Yeah, you said a couple of awesome things. The first thing, 70% of your time is wasted at work. I mean, you can see that in anybody. If you give them a deadline and give them 3 times the work they've been doing and say, this has to be done, at first they're going to say, there's no way I can do it. But then they get it done somehow, right? And almost always you get it done when you have to. It's because you're not focused. You're not working as hard as you could most of the time. That's awesome. Yeah, and people see my life, and I have set it up now where I have people working for me where I'm not working 80 hours a week anymore. But there was a long time where I was doing 12-hour days, putting in the time, working hard. I drove a Ford Mustang as my daily driver for 9 years. That was a 1991 5. I love that car. I still have it. But, it's a $7,000 car. I never had a car loan until I was 29 years old. So, and people, see what I do now and they think, oh, I can do that in a year. And, it takes work. It takes hard work, dedication, and sacrifice to get there. There's really no substitute, like you said.
I mean, even when you're good at it, I mean, look, I've built 2 businesses. One did 50 million in revenue. The other one currently still does 10 million under. And they've both been running since 2005, and they're doing great. Even at this level where you have resources, you have money, like you understand what to do, you've done it before. When I started Secret Entourage, it was a whole new thing. Like it was an e-learning platform, had nothing to do with the type of businesses I was in before, which previously were in the automotive space. I'd done really well in that. I'd done really well in the luxury lifestyle space and in the service and sales space, like in terms of creating training programs. And I was going into something totally new. I'm going into blogging, like designing, like internet marketing and all that crap. And yet I have all the money, so I don't need to be like, oh, I'm going to work every day like a slave to make this work, But I did. That's exactly what I had to do. Like, even with money, it still doesn't change the idea that when you're going into something new, even if you're experienced or not, you might carve off like a year or two, which is the basic principle of like the work ethic and this and that. But you're not going to carve off like 80 years because you're like good at what you do, unless it's exactly in the same field. And you're like, okay, I'm a real estate investor now. I'm going to be a different type of real estate investor. That's the same thing. So at that point, you have a learning curve of 6 months to a year. You readapt and you move forward, But when you're going like, hey, I'm a real estate investor, but tomorrow I want to go ahead and become an auto mechanic. It doesn't matter. Like, life doesn't give a shit what you want to do. You give a shit. So you go out there and you find a way to train yourself to be a mechanic. And that process for you to go from a normal mechanic to a great mechanic is going to take you 10 years. And what I try to tell people is that you can carve off like maybe 2-3 years if you're really intuitive about how you work, very self-aware, you identify opportunities quickly. But at the end of the day, if you go in that path saying, I want to be an auto mechanic and in 2 years, I'm going to be as good as I am a realtor, which took me 30 years to build up to. Yeah, that's not going to work. Just because you're a realtor doesn't mean that like you're going to be a great mechanic all of a sudden, without the practice, just like you weren't a great realtor in 2 years. It took you time to build that up, right? And people take that, like they completely forget that for a business to grow and for people to be successful, it's internal. So if internally you're not prepared because you don't know the field or the area, then obviously your confidence level is not to the roof, right? So these are the components that drive people to succeed or not. It's once again, we come back to this every time, but it's having the wrong expectation going into it. Like expecting success quickly instead of focusing on the task at hand and building off of it,
Yeah, no, great stuff. All right. So before we get too far into this, since usually we talk about real estate, the blog is about real estate. You made a ton of money in real estate doing something that is completely not possible today, but I'd still love to hear, how that worked, what you did, because I had never heard of that before I read about it, and how you were making money on new construction lots, basically, right?
Yeah, so I was doing something completely unethical. Who wasn't at that time? It was between the year 2000 and between 2000 and 2004, going into 2005. The economy was booming. I lived in Northern Virginia around Tyson's Corner, in the main area around where government people would live to travel to DC, etc. Keep in mind, the 2 counties I lived in were the 2 wealthiest counties in the United States. They also had the most 2 people working households, out of anywhere else. And the median income was over $110,000 back then. So this was a lot, compared to other counties. Doesn't mean it was the richest part to ever live in the United States. It just means that there was a lot of money there because of government and the high paying jobs, and like the average job paid $80K a year. So you had a lot of people that were able to buy homes, right? Like you had a lot of demand. People wanted homes, they wanted real estate, and you had a lot of families that lived there. So these were some of the key indicators. And the opportunity that came at hand is I was really young. I was in banking, so I understood how homes were bought and sold. Like I understood the mortgage process and everything else. And I already owned my first home. So being 18, I had my first home and I had bought it for a really good deal. My uncle had taught me how real estate worked, like in general, not like he wasn't a real estate trader or someone that was like, making millions off real estate and taught me the tricks. He just showed me how to buy a house and sell it. It was as basic as 1, 2, 3. And then I started, and then like a year later, he was like, you should take out a home equity. And I was like, a home equity? Like, what's that? And he was like, oh, you take out this thing. I'm in banking and I still don't really know like how home equities work. And he's like, you should take out this home equity. And here's how you leverage like $100,000. I was like, my house went up $100,000. And he's like, yeah, in like 7 months. And this was the time we were in, right? So it was fantastic. So I'm like thinking ahead, I'm like, $100,000, holy shit. Like we should buy a lot of properties, that makes sense. And then what I started seeing is I started looking for properties. Like I went like to actually buy properties like any other human being would do, like to make a lot of money. And I realized that all the properties were sold out. Or every time I would go in to like buy one, someone would outbid me or take, my offer and toss it and get something better. So I said, wait, like this demand is really high and the supply is really low. So where do people go? They keep going further and further away to more home for the money, right? It's typical, like past history data typically reflects what's going to happen in the future, right? Especially in real estate. So I looked at that and I said, okay, so people are going to go further, like 10, 15 miles out or away, and are going to be willing to take longer commutes, especially because the areas weren't really grown. You didn't have a shopping center every corner. Today you do, but back then you didn't. So I was like, wait a minute, let me just follow the trail of where they're building shopping centers, around which areas they're going to really plan to build up in the next 5 years. And I went to those places and I realized I was right. There's a ton of homes for sale that weren't coming due yet. There's signs for like coming soon, this subdivision with like 20 homes and townhomes were really popular in that area. So I would go in these places and I was like, when are you starting your model homes? They're like, well, we're going to build the models in like 7 months. We just put the sign, we're still working on leveling out the field and everything. I was like, well, I'm interested in buying some lots. So they were like, well, can you afford lots? Well, I was like, of course I can afford lots. So I couldn't really afford lots, but I could afford, they were like, how many homes can you afford? And I was like, I can afford 4 to 5. So I worked in a bank, right? So I used to like literally go out there and get myself, like I would get pre-approved, for like get a pre-approval letter. And I wasn't really buying a home, so I could get pre-approved because I didn't have a home on my credit. You follow what I'm saying? I had my own home, but not a new home now. So I would go to this area, I would buy a lot, and I would be like, how much is the lot? They were like, well, to put a deposit on the lot, you need $5,000. But once we start building, like you'll need your options up front and all the stuff you're aware of that you need when you buy a house. So I was like, okay, so let me give the $5,000 or the 10 grand, whatever they were asking, to secure a lot. So I would go to all of these different subdivisions with the same mortgage letter saying that I was approved for a house, and I would buy all of these lots. Now, these lots were like 5, sometimes 3 grand, sometimes 10 grand, right? What would happen though is like 5 months later, they would call me and say, hey, now we're starting to build these models, so you have to come start your options because you have first dibs on the lots. First time I went to one of these, I was actually going to go through and buy the house. I was like, hey, I'm going to buy a house and then I'm going to flip it in a year and make some money, and I'll do this because the first one's coming due, I'll flip it and get the next one, etc., right? But when I got there was a line, like literally like 3 days long. People had like camped there to like try to buy a lot. And the first lots were due in 6 months from that bin. Now, keep in mind, my lot was like getting ready to be built on in like a month or 2. And these other lots they were selling were dead. Now, suddenly I'm like waiting in line, like thinking this is the line to like pick your options. So I'm waiting in line and I realized these people coming out and asking for 30 to 50 grand premiums for lots. So they're literally like an auction house. They're coming out and they're like 50K today, whoever wants a lot, on top of whatever the house costs, and you can get a lot. So half the line would go away. Some people would stay, and they're like 100K. Some people would stay, some people. I'm like, you gotta be out of your mind. This is like an auction, like eBay for like homes. These guys are like completely milking the process. And then I realized I was like, holy shit, like these people are willing to pay 100 grand cash to get a lot. And they'll wait 6 months. But they literally want to live in these houses. And I don't even give a shit about the houses I have. So I started going through my contract and I went to one of my family friends who was a lawyer. I was like, look over this contract for this lot. I was like, does it say I can't flip it? And he's like, it doesn't say anything about you can't flip the lot to someone else. You just have to fill out this paperwork and do this. But technically, you own the lot. So I was like, oh, shit. I was like, an idea, like I had a light bulb that popped up. I was like, I can go in line like everyone else. And whoever's willing to pay $100K, I can give them my lot for the exact same thing. And they don't have to wait 6 months. So he was like, technically, you could. I mean, they can try to stop you. But technically, based on what's on this contract, they can't. So I went and did that. And I did that 72 times before I was caught. So, anywhere from turning a 5K investment into 50 grand, sometimes 30 grand, and in most cases, somewhere between 60 and 100 grand. And I was taking 5K flips and making them into 100K without ever owning a house. Now, like I said, I did this 72 times before I was caught. And what I meant by caught is, and there was nothing bad about it. First off, they started putting new language that I couldn't flip contracts because I was doing this in so many subdivisions and they were all pretty much were the same 3 builders. So they pretty much got what I was doing, and they started seeing that I was taking their profits. So they prevented me from flipping contracts. That was the first kind of process they put in place, but I've still found a way around that. And then the second thing is they actually put my picture in the offices, like, don't sell a lot to that guy. That's when you're in bad shape, is when you walk into a house office trying to give someone like 100 grand for a lot, and they're looking at you like, are you that guy in the poster? And I'm like, wait, you actually have a poster of me? Like, so I was like, maybe this is getting like too shady. I was like, maybe I should get out of this. So, I made a lot of money doing that. And after that, I was kind of completely out of real estate. And a lot of people today hit me up and they're like, you're a real estate investor. I'm like, not really. Like, I have a bunch of homes there and there, a few commercial properties, but nothing drastic. I'm not a full-time real estate investor. I'm not looking for properties, but I'm an opportunist in real estate today. So if someone comes to me and says, I have a unique opportunity to buy $1 million house for 300, we got to sink 200 in it to repair it. I may do like one flip there or rehab there and there, but really not someone who's into the real estate market as someone else would be if they're a real investor.
Right. No, that's a crazy story, though. I mean, that opportunity, just pouncing on it when you found it, that's just awesome. I don't think it wasn't really anything unethical about it. It's just the way the system worked back then. And a lot of people,
unethical as in someone was going to milk the client for 100 grand, right? Like someone was going to get the 100. I just found a way to interject and take the builder's 100K away from them before they gave it to someone else. I mean, it wasn't illegal. It wasn't taking more money out of someone, because a lot of people who were actually willing to pay 100 grand, I would charge them 60 grand for the lot. It was like, you were willing to pay them 100, pay me 60 and take my lot. And a lot of them were like, are you serious? I was like, yeah, and it's available. Like, you can go right now in and pick your options, versus the other way, you have to wait 6 months before going in and picking your options. So you could be in a house, literally in a few months versus like in a year. And you can pay less than you were just willing to pay right now when the guy said 100 and you still stood in line. It was being an opportunist, being at the right place and putting myself in the right place and then taking the risk. You know what I mean? Like a lot of people would be afraid. They'd be like, oh my God, what if it was bad? What if it was this? But really saying, you know what? Like, I'm going to get a lawyer, look this over. Am I doing something illegal? He's like, no. All right, good enough. Let's go do it. Like, let's go figure out a way to duplicate this as many times as we can and milk it. And a lot of people did that too. They just weren't doing lots. They were flipping homes, right? It's the same process. I mean, we just found a way to do it without any capital. I think that was the main kicker, is like the first home equity line of credit I had was really what I leveraged to buy a few lots and then kept growing from there,
Nice. And then you also bought some properties in Florida, right? With that money, and then ended up selling them.
Yeah, so towards the end, I always wanted a house in Miami. So I was into buying condos in Miami early on. And then I realized that those weren't pre-construction. They were like actually built, like condos that I was going to actually get in and out of. I enjoyed one of them tremendously. And then I realized what was going to happen with the economic collapse coming up. And I kind of got out of the majority. I kept one. And then I still had a few homes in Virginia too that ended up getting rented, that even to this day are still rented. Like, they were bought at a good enough price where they were pre-construction. I got stuck with them. And, they did well. And even today, they're still doing okay. Like, I'm not making $1 billion off of them, but they're still doing all right.
All right. I'd like to thank everyone for listening to that awesome podcast with PJ. We actually kept recording, and it went so long, we're going to break this down into 2 pieces. But this was a fantastic episode. This will be available to listen to at any time. Next week, we're going to pick up where PJ left off. Talk about how he knew a real estate crash was coming, what he did to prevent losing money in it, how he invested after that, more about his businesses, more about what he thinks people need to do to succeed, and then also a lot about what he's doing now some of his programs he has to help people become entrepreneurs, and a lot more. So stay tuned for the next show. Thanks a lot, everyone.